Welcome to week 6, and congratulations for making it over the halfway point. We still got several weeks to go and a lot to learn, so let's dive in. We're going to start with Coombs and Holliday's Handbook of Crisis Communication. You're going to reach chapter 20 of that book. We'll give you a link directly to that chapter. The purpose of the chapter is to explore how organizations are using technology in their crisis communication. The authors offer us a report where they talk about the results of a study of 60 product recalls. They examine different internet technologies used by organizations to provide instructive information to the public about the recalled product. Now, whether your organization has anything to do with recalls, there's still a lot for us to learn about crisis communication. They also provide some opportunities and challenges on internet response to product recall crises. But of course, you can take those lessons regardless of what organization you're working toward in this term, or more importantly, in your own organization, if you have the opportunity to write or revise a crisis communication plan. As you do that, think about ways that you can glean insights from this chapter. Again, you'll inform your work as part of this course, of course, but it's also important that you take those lessons and apply them to your own communication. This is true of every course throughout this program. All right, I will start with, after the Crisis of Communication Handbook, one of our readings is the Lynn Rios, Finnerman, Hahn, Bondari, and Perry, 2015, that's kind of a mouthful. It's a 2015 article about image repair campaign strategies addressing race. You may recall, sometime back, Paula Deen got herself in some hot water for some statements that she made, specifically using the N word. They build upon that case study and explore the effectiveness of some tweeted messages and the strategy that her handlers used in tweeting those messages, especially as it related to race via Twitter. They use image repair theory. It's used to analyze her tweets as part of that image repair campaign in the wake of the National Enquirer's revelation that she admitted to using the N-word during a lawsuit. Now, part of this study includes the N-word, and not in the way that I'm describing it. So just be prepared when you read that. It is quoted verbatim. Don't mean to offend anyone, and I'm sure the study's authors didn't either, but it was part of the study, and so that's why they included that. Also keep in mind, as with any study, there are some limitations, and your authors describe some of those. I thought they were worth pulling out and mentioning them. One, the respondents were young college students, so a very finite or a very small segment of our whole population. Also, I find most interesting, especially as it relates to this case study, that 88% of the respondents identified themselves as Caucasian or white. And so when you're dealing with an issue like this, it is a limitation, and it would be interesting to see, as your authors note, if anything changed in their study or in the results of their study based upon a different demographic, age, race, gender, etc. The findings indicate that any response strategy is better than no response, and that's almost always the case. There are some rare exceptions where no response is the best strategy, but typically you'll want to get some information out there. Otherwise, that void is going to be filled with other people, and typically it's not going to be filled with the communication that you want for your organization. All right, another 2015 article that we're going to read this week is from Tuning. It's called Multiple Voices and Multiple Media. The article's author explores the impact of information and communication technology. Information and communication technology. They sometimes refer to it as ICT, so when you see that acronym, that's what they're referring to. And they look at how ICT is influenced by or used by people inside the field of crisis communication. Obviously, that's a very hot topic. The more that technology becomes pervasive throughout our society, the more that people rely upon it, not only to receive information in a crisis, but also organizational leaders use it to convey information. It deconstructs the crisis response following the British petroleum oil spill from an organizational, media, and a stakeholder perspective. So you get 3 parts of that perspective for that particular crisis. They specifically look at Facebook, and one of the quotes that I'll pull out, they said, just as BP did not engage directly with stakeholders via Facebook, it appears that users posting to BP's Facebook page did not directly engage in dialogue with BP. In other words, they were like two ships passing in the night, not really engaging or communicating with one another. They were simply putting messages out from an organizational perspective and perhaps from a stakeholder perspective, posting messages. There was no meeting there, no engagement, which kind of hinders the communication, of course. The findings of that report support the idea that both source and media, okay, so it's more than just what you're saying, it's how you're saying it or upon what media you're using to convey that message. They both play an important role in emphasizing your organization's message, especially during a crisis. Okay, next article from Ott and Thunissen, Reputations at Risk, Engagement During Social Media Crisis. The article is based on an in-depth analysis of 3 multinational profit-making organizations experiencing social media crisis. And this is interesting because you don't have just one case study, they've got 3 that they've outlined for you, and so you can draw some lessons from each of those 3 organizations. One of the things they found is that authenticity of voice and transparency were crucial factors for success. Whereas kind of engaging indiscriminately with emotional individuals, that could potentially escalate the issue. So be careful to whom you communicate via social media. And then the article offers some strategies for engagement during social media crisis. And again, as I indicated at the beginning of this video, take those parts that you find of interest for your work in this course, and of course, outside of this course for your own organization. Last thought on the Ott article, the latest figures show that internet users spend most of their time on social networks. And half of all social media users said that at least once a month they had expressed complaints or concerns about brands or services on social media. So let me break that down and offer some advice on how that applies to us. If our customers are using social media to communicate, especially if they're using it to communicate their displeasure with the service or product we're offering, we need to know that. And it's important for us as communicators within the organization to be monitoring social media so that we know what's being said about our product, about our service, about our company, about our organization. We can't correct it. We can't offer any communication to help unless we know that those are being communicated. So if you don't already have something in place, make sure that you recommend to your organization leaders that they monitor or put systems in place to monitor social media, things that are being said about you and your organization. All right. Next article is the Spence, Lachlan, Lynn, and Del Greco article, Variability in Twitter Content Across the Stages of a Natural Disaster. Obviously, a natural disaster is one of the crises that we study throughout this course. The study itself analyzed the content of over 1,500 tweets that were sent in the days leading up to the landfall of Hurricane Sandy. Your authors note that natural disasters, crisis, and other extreme events create circumstances requiring efficient, timely, and targeted communication efforts. As technology continues to evolve, so too must our technologies or use of technology. So it's not enough to say, well, this is the way we did it 5 years ago when we had a similar event. You've got to be, as the communicator, constantly keeping up with what are the latest trends. How do your audiences communicate? Because that's the way you'll want to write your communication plan, your crisis response plan, in order to ensure that you're broadcasting along the frequency, in other words, using the media that your audience uses. Your authors also note that social media outlets often provide a venue for eyewitnesses. So you may be able to get some eyewitness up-to-the-minute accounts of what's going on, especially during a crisis like a natural disaster, from people who are there. And that's invaluable to your leadership. And so you might be able to position yourself as a communicator to help leaders or maybe other people within your organization who need that information, and you can provide that as well. Your authors note that social media has evolved to become an interactive, collaborative, conversational, and community-based platform for crisis communication. You can't just send it and forget it, all right? You got to send it and monitor it and make sure it has its intended effect. Also have a system in place so that you are receiving messages from your audiences so that you can engage in a two-way conversation. It's one of the beautiful things about social media is this two-way engagement, as opposed to before social media came around, a lot of what we did was simply fire and forget. Right? We sit it out there and we hope it worked, unless we actually went into the field and surveyed or spent some other resource to poll our audience, survey our audience. We didn't really know how effective it was. Social media allows us to, at least initially, get some level of engagement from our audience. All right, final article this week is Kinski et al., and that's from 2014. Their article is entitled Pulling Ads, Making Apologies, Lowe's Use of Facebook to Communicate with Stakeholders. I'll let you read the case study itself, but here are some highlights. They examined the use of Facebook by Lowe's. It was trying to reach its stakeholders after the controversial decision to pull its advertising from TLC's All-American Muslim. Some of you may remember that. If you don't, there's a pretty good summation of that inside the case study you can read. Their original statement resulted in thousands of vitriolic responses. So many that Lowe's decided to pull the apology along with 28,000 comments. Now let me stop right there. It is almost never appropriate to pull down a post, especially a post that has received thousands upon thousands of comments. You just create a lot more problems for yourself when you do that. If you want to update the post, by all means, reference that previous post and then allow the conversation to continue. But again, you're almost never going to make yourself or your organization better off by pulling down a post. If there's a mistake, spelling, grammar, things like that, obviously you can correct those. But once it's out there, just own it. And if it doesn't have the intended effect, then do something to help the future message, but don't pull it down thinking nobody's going to see it. Once it's posted, there are software programs that automatically capture it, and so it's already out there, and now you've pulled it down. Your audience wants to know what you're hiding, and you've pulled down the 28,000 posts that are with it as well, which in a way people take ownership of. So you create a lot of problems for yourself. Almost never appropriate to pull down a post. And so when I read the case study, that was one of my takeaways. And I've been in organizations where people wanted to pull down a post, either a post that maybe we had put up as an organization, or perhaps a post that someone has put on our Facebook page or direct message or tweeted or whatever the social media platform is. Unless it's a direct violation, and it better be a very clear violation of previously posted policies, just leave it. Let it go, okay? You create a lot more problems by trying to pull it down than you will just letting it go and, again, manage the communication forward. That is part of the communication. That's part of your story. Own it. And then going forward, see what you can do to influence future communication. Not going to be able to rewrite history, regardless of how much you try. And then a final point from this article I thought was helpful is that Facebook users want to engage with organizations on their own terms, okay? Perhaps they want discounts or contests or sharing organizational likes with peers, but they don't want you to invade their privacy by being pushy through social media. That's typically not what people like. And, put yourself in their position. You don't want to be bombarded with advertisement all the time, or even things that pretend to be engagement but are really just ways to try to draw you into their business. That's not what they want. And I'll share another example with you. When I was at Recruiting Command, we were developing their social media strategy. And what we decided to do is to use social media for conversation. Okay, now our job as Navy Recruiting Command was to bring people in the Navy. But we didn't want to use social media as a strict or straight stick recruiting tool. We just wanted to create a conversation. Now, if somebody during that conversation expressed an interest, then we would push them over to either a phone call, text, email, face-to-face, some other form of communication in which they can maybe continue their interest in joining the Navy. But for the most part, all social media was just used for communication. Very soft sell, if any sell at all, about the Navy and why that Navy or the Navy may be a career for you. And we found that it was very effective. The social media obviously grew in terms of not just likes and shares and things like that, but actual engagement. People who went there seeking information. So you might consider doing the same for your organization. All right, I know that's a lot. We have a lot every week. Hopefully by now you've kind of gotten used to that caseload and you found ways to manage your time appropriately to get through the reading and pulling out those parts that are most interesting to you. As always, stay ahead with your assignments, stay engaged in the discussion board, and most importantly, enjoy this time of learning.